The Green Lantern power rings are some of the most powerful weapons in the DC universe. The same is true for their counterparts, the yellow power rings of Cord. These rings allow their wielder to conjure whatever their minds can visualize. So what would happen if a yellow ring with unimaginable power was given to a mind whose madness can conjure the worst things imaginable? That question is answered by Alexander Nero, who I can't wait to tell you more about on this episode of Lesser Evils. Alexander Nero first appeared in Green Lantern issue 132 from 2001. When Alexander was young, he appeared as typical as any other child his age, but as he grew older, Alexander began suffering mental issues that evolved into outbursts of anger and declining grades. When Alexander was 15, his father murdered his mother before committing suicide himself. There was speculation that Alexander might have been responsible, but no proof was ever found. His parents' death caused Alexander Nero to suffer a psychotic break, leading to him being institutionalized for several years. Nero's extreme paranoia and delusions of grandeur are channeled through his great talent as an artist. Despite the graphicness of his imagery, even Nero's doctors admit his skill is impressive. In the present, the Weaponeers of Cord, longtime foes of the Green Lanterns, search for a worthy wielder of a Cordian power ring, just like the one worn by the Green Lantern villain Sinestro. After the failure of their previous test subject, the Weaponeers appear to Nero in his room and offer him the power of the Yellow Ring. Alexander Nero wastes no time and begins attacking pedestrians on the Brooklyn Bridge. This commotion catches the attention of the Golden Age Green Lantern, Alan Scott, who is currently going by the name Sentinel. The skilled and experienced Sentinel wrangles a pair of the beasts with his magical ring, but quickly finds himself in a more dangerous situation as more deadly yellow monstrosities pour onto the scene. The current and only legitimate Green Lantern at the time was Kyle Rayner, who arrives on the scene 15 minutes later and finds Sentinel hurt and close to being overwhelmed. Rayner uses his ring to power through the opposing monsters to rescue his ring-wielding forebear, but as the two men attempt to escape, Nero calls out to the heroes. Kyle Rayner's attention is taken by Nero's yellow ring, similar to the one he had faced off against in the recent past. Nero announces that he is the protector of the realm, but the topic of parents sends him into a fit of religious ranting. Rationalizing that Rayner is his enemy for helping Sentinel, Nero attacks the pair. The Green Lantern's only goal is to get his friend to safety and he avoids fighting. This is made difficult by Nero's overwhelming amount of constructs. Nero manages to catch Kyle Rayner at one point and moves to kill him, only to be blasted away by the still conscious Sentinel. Nero bounces right back with another monstrous conjuration. It takes a trademark infringing kaiju construct to cause enough of a distraction for Green Lantern to escape and get Sentinel medical help. Fuck, I love comics. High on his own power, Nero states that this is only the beginning. A lucky break leads Green Lantern to discover who Alexander Nero is, and that the man's madness is only eclipsed by his creativity. Green Lantern realizes how dangerous Nero is and calls in the Justice League. He explains the situation to the team and broaches the topic of possibly killing Nero. Green Lantern reveals how their lantern rings have the powers of nuclear bombs, making Nero one of the most dangerous men on the planet. That morning, Nero begins terrorizing New York City's population by sending his constructs all over the city to cause mischief and mayhem. By noon, those constructs had moved from being a nuisance to becoming legitimate threats. Green Lantern is reluctantly impressed by the amount of constructs Nero can create outside of his sightline. For 3 hours, the Justice League battle the yellow constructs across the city. For every monster the heroes manage to destroy, more just end up taking their place. Green Lantern is eventually alerted to Nero's presence in Times Square, where Alexander Nero intends to purge the land by killing everybody in New York. Green Lantern arrives to find Nero surrounded by a horde of conjurations. In order to keep the fight between himself and Green Lantern, Nero has his creations focus on keeping the Justice League distracted. The two ring slingers attack each other as Nero rattles off his delusions and quickly begins to increase the pressure. Green Lantern struggles to defend himself while Nero simultaneously attacks the citizens in the buildings around them. Hoping to end the fight, Green Lantern slugs Nero across a city block. Even while he is down, Nero continues his religious muttering. Green Lantern moves to shut Nero up with his fists, but the Madman powers up with an overwhelming wall of yellow constructs. Realizing that he cannot overpower Nero, Green Lantern changes strategies. He sends the Flash to retrieve a videotape of Alexander Nero with his family. Using his ring as a projector, Green Lantern plays the video, which causes Nero to lose his focus on the fight. Nero unconsciously begins manifesting malevolent versions of his parents, who begin to belittle Nero as they turn more monstrous. The stress of the situation causes Nero to explode with power, leaving a large smoking crater behind. After the battle in New York, Alexander Nero winds up in a backwoods part of Europe. His broken mind generates chains to bind himself, while constructs of his parents viciously mock and insult him. Their influence causes Nero to create a terrifying monster that begins murdering the population of a nearby town. On the other side of the world, Kyle Rayner attempts to stop a bomb and achieves a new level of power after containing the explosion. Back in his hovel, Alexander Nero feels the Green Lantern power. This seems to grant clarity to Nero as his delusions fade away and he sees a path to salvation open to him. When Nero leaves the woods to search for the power, Green Lantern senses his rival is coming for him. After discussing the situation with a group of former Green Lanterns, Kyle Rayner hypothesizes that Nero has been able to siphon off Rayner's Green Lantern energy. But if he taps into Rayner's new level of power, Nero could reshape the world. In space, Nero is surrounded by his creations and feels happiness as his delusions have caused him to believe that he is actually God. When Green Lantern confronts Nero, the delusional villain believes he made the hero appear. As Nero pontificates his sense of godliness, Green Lantern sucker punches him with a number of conjured syringes full of medication. Nero is unfazed as he reveals how he has made himself immune to the drug's effects. Surrounded by the horrors of his mind made real, Nero challenges Kyle to a fight for the power. Floating over the planet, Nero and Rayner clash with the wildest constructs their imagination can produce. Neither man speaks, their sole focus being to gain control of the godlike power. The fight is interrupted by the arrival of a Cordian warship that blasts the two combatants apart. The Weaponeer's goal is to rescue Nero with a teleportation device in case he loses this fight. They sacrifice many of their soldiers to plant the device on Nero. The villain ends up destroying the remaining Weaponeers by himself before raising his game once again and going for the Green Lantern's throat. Utilizing a recently discovered aspect of his new level of power, Green Lantern brings Nero into a shared mental space where the pair fight as normal men with just their hands and feet, but Nero's talents did not extend to fistfighting, and he is taken down. Nero seemingly disappears without notice or mention, presumably teleported away by the Weaponeers. At some point off-screen, Sinestro gets a hold of Alexander Nero and messes with the man's already broken mind. The villain's goal is to break the will of the Green Lantern Kyle Rayner, whose great power had developed into hosting the willpower entity called Ion, as well as kickstart the recently reborn Green Lantern Corps. Sinestro hoped to make Rayner vulnerable to possession by the yellow embodiment of fear known as Parallax. Nero's mind is broken so far that he becomes convinced that he is Kyle Rayner. Wearing Kyle Rayner's face, Nero begins attacking habitated worlds like the home planet of the Khund. Despite the Khund's militaristic nature, Nero cuts through their forces. The arrival of the Green Lantern Hal Jordan prevents further death as he attempts to help the man who he thinks is his friend. Jordan realizes something isn't quite right when Nero attacks him. Hal Jordan reluctantly, but forcefully, hits back at the foe Kyle Rayner. The attack shatters the illusion, and much to Jordan's surprise, it reveals the real and very confused Alexander Nero. Beginning to remember himself, Nero notes that he never asked for his ring, before he explodes with energy and demands to be left alone. Nero puts on Rayner's face again and appears evenly matched with the far more experienced Hal Jordan. The arrival of the real Kyle Rayner surprises Nero, who quickly winds up in an emerald straitjacket. The two Green Lanterns discuss how Nero is still tapping into the Ion power. While they talk, Nero's constructs fill the straitjacket until it explodes and he engulfs himself in a monstrous yellow creation. Working together, the pair of Green Lanterns secure Nero again, only for him to prove whatever they can do, he can do more. Speaking of they who manipulated him, Nero rushes Kyle Rayner. The Green Lantern decides to give Nero what he wants and overloads him with his greater Ion power. The overdose of power puts Nero into a catatonic state, and he is packaged up for transport to the Green Lantern homeworld. When Rayner arrives on Oa with Nero, he meets with the Guardians of the Universe right away, and demands they reveal what they know about Nero's identity theft and how he has been manipulated. While the two parties speak, Nero awakens and becomes alarmed when he realizes where he is. In a full panic, Nero shatters his restraints, screaming that they shouldn't have brought him to the Guardians. Suddenly filling with energy, Nero releases a giant yellow explosion. The destruction is prevented by Kyle Rayner's Ion power, and the Guardians of Oa recapture an exhausted Nero. The Guardians promise to search Nero's mind for anything useful the villain knows. But after their interrogation, the Guardians find all the useful knowledge has been removed from the man's broken mind. After the fallout of the Sinestro Corps War, Alexander Nero escapes his imprisonment. He immediately moves to get his revenge on Kyle Rayner, who is currently busy training the new holder of the Ion Power, the Daxamite Superman Green Lantern known as Sodom Yat. Nero makes his presence known by literally crushing the Lantern's creations. He claims that he could taste the Ion Power from across the galaxy, and he wastes no time ripping into the pair of Green Lanterns. Nero holds off both Lanterns with his overwhelming power, but focuses on making Kyle Rayner pay for everything he has suffered. Sodom Yat surprises Nero when he attacks him with his heat vision and saves his mentor. Switching his focus, Nero attacks Sodom Yat, but is surprised by this new Ion who converts Nero's yellow lantern energy into green and burns out the connection Nero had to the Ion entity. Rendered unconscious by the attack, Nero is easily captured again. Sometime later, another breakout occurs in the prison cells on Oa. Alexander Nero is among those prisoners trying to escape. After the riots are quelled and the prisoners recaptured, all of the criminals are assembled for execution by the cyborg Alpha Lanterns. Despite the interference of two arriving Green Lanterns, Alexander Nero is executed in cold blood by the robotic Green Lantern, and his lifeless corpse added to the pile. Nero wouldn't stay down for long though, when the Blackest Night event happens. Black Lantern rings arrive at the burial grounds for the Green Lantern Corps. The rings smash their way into the tombs and begin resurrecting the corpses of the Green Lantern friends and enemies alike. That included the deceased Alexander Nero, sporting a different ring now. Whatever Nero did, or whose heart he might have ripped out after coming back, is unknown, but it's safe to presume he was destroyed alongside the other Black Lanterns at the end of the event. That was in 2009, and Alexander Nero hasn't appeared again since. So why do I like Alexander Nero? I think Nero is a victim as much as he is a villain. Whether it's suffering the delusions of his own mind, or the machinations of the Weaponeers of Cord, or the manipulations of Sinestro, Nero was rarely ever in control of his own actions. His driving forces were almost always other people's goals. Despite being gifted one of the most powerful weapons in the universe, and exhibiting capabilities greater than most any other ringslinger, Nero again and again found himself being a pawn instead of a king. Consistently, Nero showed that he could overpower the most skilled and experienced Green Lanterns, seemingly by pure instinct as readers never see him training with his yellow ring. Nero's creations were visually awesome, where so many ring wielders have no real imagination in their creations. Also, Nero wore his yellow ring way before Sinestro franchised it, which makes him cooler to me. His damaged mind could do more with that power ring than just about anyone before or since. He held back the Justice League without trying, and brought one of the DC Universe's most powerful alien races, who once took over the whole of Australia, to their knees single-handedly and without knowing who he was. His ability to tap into deeper and deeper reserves of power would make the fighters from the Dragon Ball franchise jealous. All of this cool, only to be executed by evil Green Lanterns with no fanfare, and then to be brought back as a murder machine without ever getting to see what he does. As far as I can tell, Nero's ring should still be out there in the universe somewhere. Maybe it's just waiting for a new madness to empower it, or maybe it's just waiting for Alexander Nero to return and wear the ring again.